we're going to be talking about two major types of population growth. The first is where you have populations that grow independent of their density. We also call these density-independent population growth. Organisms like this grow along a trajectory that looks something like this for whooping cranes. So you can see on the x-axis here we have time, and on the y-axis we have the population size, or the number of adults. It's a steady growth. The rate of growth is constant, but it's a steady growth. If we were to overlay an average line, it would look something like that. The second type of population growth we're going to look at are where populations grow dependent on their density. And what that means is that birth and death rates are dependent on the number of individuals in the population. Something like barnacles would follow this type of population growth. Average line would look something like this. But here we're only going to be concerned about the first type. So density-independent population growth. This is where population grows with unlimited resource and there's no competition. Now, because this is population biology, we're talking about competition within the species. So that would be intra-specific competition, not competition with other species. If you look at the graph on the x-axis, we have time, and on the y-axis, we have the number of individuals in a population. Again, the rate of growth is constant, but the number of individuals we add at each time step grows because there's larger numbers at each time step. The only limitation on this type of population is how fast it can reproduce. And so that's a really important point. These populations will grow and only be limited by how fast they can reproduce. So first we want to take a step back and we want to look at closed population and open populations. In a closed population, you can only add individuals through birth and death, and you can only grow individuals through birth and lose individuals through death. Open populations are different, and here you can add individuals through immigration and birth and lose individuals through death and emigration. These are going to be our metapopulations, which we're going to talk about in a different slideshow. So for a closed population, the change in the number of individuals, that's what that triangle means, the change. So it's the change in the number of individuals equals births minus deaths. So density-independent growth is also known as exponential growth. So think about this. So an employer offers you two equal jobs for 1 hour each day for 14 days. The first job pays $10 an hour, and the second job pays only 1 cent a day, but the rate doubles each day. Which job will you accept? Now, at the surface, you look, well, for 14 days and $10 an hour, that would be $140 at the end of 10 days. And it seems really unlikely that if you start out at a penny and you double it each day for 14 days, that amount will exceed the $140. If you chose the former, you would be losing money. Here's how it would work. So our first job is at constant rate. You're earning $10 an hour. But in the second job, you're doubling your money every single day. And at first, those increments are very, very, very small. But as time goes on, because your 1 cent grows to 2 cents, grows to 4 cents, grows to 8 cents, grows to 16 cents, and on and on and on, by the time you get into dollar amounts, you're going to be doubling by that amount of dollars, and it's really going to take off at some point. So job 2 lags for a long time before exponential growth kicks in. That's very common with exponential growth. Now, how much would your employer owe if you stayed at this job for 2 weeks? You would owe a lot more. And which population experiences this kind of growth? We're going to talk about that in a little bit. But first, let's look at job 1. So at $10 an hour for 14 days, you get $140. Job 2, if you double the population each day over 4 days, the equation to figure that out would be 2, which is the doubling time, to the 14th over 100. Now again, I'm not going to be asking you to calculate doubling times, and I'm not going to be asking you to do any kind of math like this for an exam, but it is important that you kind of understand how it works. So if you had 1 cent a day, doubled each day over 14 days, you would actually be getting $163.83 total. And that is substantially more than the $140. So density-independent growth is population growth that proceeds regardless of population size. That's why it's independent of the density. Your birth and death rates have no bearing on the density. Like, they don't affect the density, or are not affected by the density, I should say. Populations are not limited by resources. In these kind of populations, they have unlimited resource, and growth is only limited by the ability to reproduce. Now, you may say, that's really unrealistic. Well, you're right. It is unrealistic, but it does happen. So let's look at cases, or one case where this could go on. So this are water hyacinth plants, and it does follow an exponential growth curve. But let's go through it a little more slowly. First, we're going to look at invasive species. Invasive species like these rabbits introduced to Australia grow exponentially. So invasive species are the classic species that experience population growth. We're going to talk more about these rabbits when we talk about parasitism. Another invasive species are starlings. Starlings are birds that in 1890, people released some of these starlings in Central Park. People thought that they would be really neat to be brought into the New World. And now you can see that they are everywhere. They've expanded in their range pretty quickly. They're all over California, and you can see them on the campus of CCSF. If you go into the parking lots, definitely see them. They have that iridescent sheen to them. They're pretty bad invasives, and they do kill other songbirds or displace other songbirds. They do exist in incredibly large numbers. And if you come in the spring, you actually can see them do their mating rituals, which is kind of fun. When they get together in large numbers, they're known as what we call a murmuration. And here you can see there's just thousands and thousands of individuals that just fly together in these great groups, and they do this synchronized flying. This occurs probably because these are males, and they're young males, and they are looking for a place to roost at night, and they are doing some kind of social interaction. All right. Let's move on. So why do some environmental problems sometimes appear so suddenly? So we're back to our water hyacinth example. So water hyacinth is a floating plant. It's invasive. It originally came from South America, and now it's pretty much around the world. It is a floating plant and can be very pretty, but it covers water so completely that it obstructs the movement of boats. Not only that, but it prevents sunlight from hitting the top of the water, and so prevents photosynthesis. We have that breakdown of photosynthesis. You have a breakdown in the food chain. So this is India, picture on the left. So imagine a lake that's 10 kilometers in diameter. And just imagine it takes 8 billion, that's billion with a B, hyacinth plants to cover a lake of this size completely. Now suppose this lake has no water hyacinth, and one hyacinth plant is introduced. We're also going to assume this plant reproduces asexually. We're going to say it has a doubling time of 1 month. That means every month the plant doubles, and it reproduces. So it doubles in size, the population. So after 1 month, you have 2 plants. The doubling continues month after month, and after 2 years, we have 17 million plants. But it's only 17 million. Nobody's going to pay attention to that because it's 17 million. Now remember, this lake is 10 kilometers in diameter, and it's going to take several billion plants in order to cover it. So those 17 million plants, while it sounds like a lot, only cover 0.2% of the lake. Now this is after 2 years. So the problem doesn't seem so bad. And if you had a limited amount of money, you might want to put off taking care of this problem. So the doubling continues month after month, and after 2 years, we have 17 million plants. Nobody pays attention. Again, it's only 0.2% of the lake. After 6 months, there are 1 billion water hyacinth plants, which cover about 13% of the lake. So think about it. It took you 2 years to get to 0.2% coverage. It takes only another 6 months to get to 13%. Now people are noticing the plants. You actually can see them on the water, but there's not enough to be a problem for the movement of boats. And so no one does anything. Some people say, don't worry, it took a long time to get this many hyacinths. It'll be a long time before there are enough to cause a problem. But with hyacinths doubling every month, the lake will be completely covered after only 3 more months. Remember, 2 years to get to 0.2% coverage, another 6 months to get to 13% coverage, and another 3 months to get to total coverage. This is classic exponential growth or density independent growth. You can just see it starts out very slow if you look at the one on the bottom, and it just takes off because you're doubling every month. So once you get to, 1 billion plants and you're doubling it, you're adding another billion. So the growth is very rapid once it takes off. So this is one of those plants that's uncontrollable in many places. It includes the world's second largest lake, Lake Victoria in East Africa. You can actually see it from space. That is how bad this problem can be. And it's also one of the reasons a lot of times invasive species aren't taken care of right away, because you don't notice them right away. And they get to be a problem only after their growth is uncontrolled. Again, this is density independent growth or exponential growth. And that's all we're going to talk about for this one.